Like a couple of old English explorers, we started fly fishing up the valley. This part of Bhutan can be quite dry in the middle of the year, but the river was glorious. And yet, at the back of our minds was the thought, we've come a long way to find out the talk of brown trout was just a myth. And then bang, there were fish in the river. In fact, as it turned out, the river was full of them, and that tends to keep the size down. They were all beautifully coloured brown trout.
It was time to hit the river, and what a river. In the hour or two we spent walking downstream, the only footprints we saw were of some mountain cattle, wombats and a deer. No roads, no tracks, just the sound of a stream making its way through the wilderness. And by the time we sat down to rig up, it had given us a feeling somewhere between isolation and solitude. Now it was just a question of choosing the right fly and hitting the water.
We're always talking about the light up in these mountains, and we're not sure what it is. The clear water, the rocks, the way the eucalypts filter the light, or just the purity of the air. But at certain times of the day, the light up here becomes positively incandescent. It's as if everything's on fire and the river is burning with sunlight, even exploding. You're so distracted that catching a fish is a surprise, like, oh yeah, I'd forgotten why I was casting that fly back and forward. But you know, the funny thing is that even when you pick up the fish at this time of day, even the fish burns with colour and light, and it never loses its novelty.
Just changing down fly, I think this one might be a little large. As is my rod, I suspect. You see that thing there, line weight 5. Rods are rated according to the line weight they can take, and they range from down low, little 2 and 3 weights. What's your weight, Rob?
2.
2 weight rod is what Rob's using, right up to, I think, 16, 17s. I don't even know what they use them for, clubbing whales or something. But 5's probably a little bit of overkill on a river like this because it is so low and the water is so clear. And we're finding we have to move really cautiously. It's just a question of keeping down low and not making any sudden movement that might scare off a trout. Hopefully that'll be enough. I say hopefully because if it's not, the next step is And I think we all want to avoid that.
Tom had given me an idea. Now I have to admit it's not the first time I've used this trick. You see, the basic rule is to use every bit of camouflage you can find or invent. It may look silly, well it does look silly, but it's very effective. And sure enough, just below those reeds was a little mountain trout swimming in the current.
Round the middle of the day, things got a little quiet and the fish seemed to go off the bite. Time for a change of tactics. We've been fishing for a while with one of these. It's a humpy, a little beetle, I guess, imitation. Not having much luck, so in times like this you tend to look around and try and work out what else the trout might be feeding on, if not beetles. And I've got a theory. Oh, that was easy. Here's what I was chasing. A little grasshopper. There's hundreds of them around here. I think that's what the trout are feeding on. And that is the grasshopper imitation in fly form. But let's hope the trout are a little short-sighted.
We didn't mean to stop in Jackson, Wyoming. We were actually headed for Pinedale. It's just that when we woke up in the morning, it was too beautiful to leave. These valleys around the Tetons are special for some pretty obvious reasons, but we wanted to explore the meadows for a more obscure one. You see, for fly fishermen, they have probably the most sought-after type of water in the world. Spring creeks. They're a curious type of stream, fed not by runoff but by underground springs, often arising within 100 metres and rarely very long. They are crystal clear, stunning little waters. And best of all, trout love them. And don't get me wrong, it's not a free-for-all. They're owned and jealously guarded. But there's something about coming all the way from Australia, and a promise you'll definitely go back, that leaves the odd gate slightly ajar. It's pretty easy to see the fish, which means it's pretty easy for them to see you. I was acting as a forward scout, a sapper. Yep, they're there.
I was acting as the fisherman, or the lucky one. Fishing on spring creeks can be frustrating, watching as a trout sips flies off the surface time and time again, but never takes yours, is agonising. But when you do cast the right fly out and it's taken, well, they count as little magic moments. This was our first view of a cutthroat trout, named for the bright red slash beneath its gills. It's a species native to Rocky Mountain streams, and so naturally, that's where we returned it.
We could have stayed there all day. Just quietly, I think we did. Yep, we did. But it got late and we still had a trip to make. Well, maybe there's time for a couple more casts.
Not much was happening trout-wise, but it was still early days. Around 11 o'clock, a few storm clouds started to build on the horizon, which was a good sign. You see, insects like overcast conditions. Anyway, sure enough, the stoneflies started to hatch.
Time to pull out the fly box and compare notes. Dry flies are often tied not so they look exactly the same on the surface, but from below, so they throw the same sort of silhouette. Then it gets down to size and colour. The stoneflies proved to be spot on. They deceived the fish almost immediately.
The trout in these streams are quite varied: brown, brook, cutthroat and rainbow, but all their colorations were quite magnificent. From then on, it was on. The prospect of gobbling down a big stonefly proved too much temptation for even the smartest of these fish. I don't know what the human equivalent is, having half a dozen oysters float past your nose. In the quickly flowing runs, in the quiet water, wherever we put a big bushy stonefly, the fish said, "Thank you very much."
Later on, when the sun came out, things quietened down again, and the fish were a little harder to fool. Yeah, I know what that is up there. That's one of them things Jack Dennis tied. But if the fish wouldn't come out, the colours certainly did. So we just weaved our way up towards the mountain. Something just occurred to me then. That's an old beaver dam. I was thinking there's a good place to cross the river. They build them in summer and raise their young there. In actual fact, when I think of it, there are 3 or 4 further downstream. The wildlife around here is incredible. They've still got mountain lions up in the hills and, of course, grizzlies, although they keep a close eye on them. In the old days, they used to be out on the plains. We've also got elk and antelope and deer and Hereford cattle, although they may be introduced. I'm not sure about those.
The threat of a grizzly notwithstanding, the area proved to be remarkably tranquil. And at times on the way back to the cabin, scenically overwhelming.
Early in the afternoon, we made it to our overnight destination, Hope Island. It turned out to be an idyllic place. But we'd have to explore it later. First, we had to catch some fish for dinner. Hope Island is surrounded by reefs, which means coral trout. And fortunately, that's just what we were chasing. The idea is to cast the fly alongside coral outcrops where they sit waiting to ambush. Now, we'd been told about their magnificent colours, but nothing prepares you for how vivid they are in real life. They're quite extraordinary. They're also pretty aggressive at certain times of the day. There was going to be no trouble catching enough for dinner.
That's what I was looking for. Painted prey. They're Cape York's local species. This isn't even a big one, but it'll be just the thing for dinner.
Even the idea that the engine would fail gave us a chill, and Prudence says we should have turned back, but we didn't. I'm not exactly certain how far we went upriver, a long way that's for sure, but it was constantly intriguing and exciting. I guess it would be different if you're a botanist. You could probably name everything. But for us, it was strange to go to a place where each plant and fruit was one you've never seen before. Time eventually ran out and we headed back downstream.
I guess the major difference between fresh and saltwater fly fishing, apart from the millinery, is presentation. It's the way you present the fly on the water. With freshwater fishing, say something like trout, delicacy is really important. You have to just let the fly drop very gently down. If you splash it down on the water, chances are you'll send the trout running for cover. But up rivers like this, the fish seem to be more aggressive, more territorial. In fact, the best thing you can do is sort of slap the fly down quite hard, and it brings them out looking at it and attacking it and hopefully getting caught.
These sort of saltwater fish are quite predatory. You just have to keep casting until the fly goes past their nose, and then bang!
The next hour went ballistic, with just about every species of fish throwing themselves at our flies. Goldspot trevally, fingermark, mangrove jack. In fact, some of them became positively annoying. We kept one or two for dinner, and then started heading back to cook. Only, we made a detour. On the way down, we noticed a little creek, I guess more a tidal inlet, and decided to have a little wade while the tide continued to flow in. Now, if you think this looks crazy, you may be right, but we did check the clear water for crocs from the mangroves first. I guess on reflection it was crazy.
Here's the interesting thing. The steelhead trout in the Tongariro are not actually interested in food right now. So getting them to attack your fly is a question of annoying them. You make a cast and let the fly drift through the pool. Then another cast, and another. In any other form of fly fishing, if you don't get a strike on the first few casts, you give up and move on. But here, you keep casting 20, 30, even 40 times. It can all get a little hypnotic after a while. You fall into a sort of lazy rhythm with the rod and the fly line. Cast, strip, cast, strip. Your concentration starts to slip a bit. Now, why am I doing this again? Something to do with fish. It's at that moment the strike indicator dips. You strike with the rod, the line goes taut, and you've got an angry steelhead on the other end of the line. He has a quick think and decides he's going to go all the way back to Lake Taupo. At this point, you don't argue, you just pray that knot you tied with sleepy eyes this morning was at least half decent. After that, it's a case of a little pressure and patience and persistence. And if all goes well, they tire and you get to see one of these superb rainbows up close.
They're not only big, they're in beautiful condition. There's actually a formula they use to work out a trout's conditions, something to do with girth-length ratio. But you don't need it here to work out that they are well and truly fattened up for their spawn run. We got him on what's called a glow bug pattern. They bite it out of aggression as it runs past their nose. Now we're putting this one back because, believe it or not, it may be a little undersized. It actually doesn't take them long to revive, and then they just swim away to land. When a big fish decides to go downstream, of course, you follow. Fortunately, our knots at the end of the day are better than the ones at the start. Yeah, just a lazy 6-pounder. And before we headed off to cook the fish, I had just enough time to stand on a rock and do my Zane Grey impression. Now, where are those bonies? Ah, there's a couple. Strip, 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 strip. Bingo. It's said that bonefish are pound for pound about the fastest fish in the world. It's either bonefish or a barracuda, and that's exactly what's chasing the boney on the end of my line. Somebody just doesn't want us to catch a bonefish. There's the barracuda making off with the other half there. Tom had another one on the line, but this time it stayed in the school of bonefish, which was agitated and was tearing all over the place. So the fish was making run after searing run. The bursts of speed make the rod dip and bend violently. Actually, it's only a matter of time before the fly comes loose or the line cuts on a piece of coral. You got it this time, Tommy. That's yours. No worries about that. That baby's yours. Bad luck. Gets kind of annoying after a while. Yep, it was time to team up. They can't be that hard to land. There, that's broken the drought.
Spotting bonefish from ground level isn't easy, and as there aren't exactly many mountains or hills around Turnef, you have to make use of whatever heights you can find. Bonefish and barracuda aren't the only species you find in these waters. Even the odd shark can swim by.
These are fantastic little islands. There's a whole string of them along here. Just the sort of island you'd hope to be shipwrecked on. In fact, a fellow lives on one of them further up. He's been there for about 20 years. They're formed by the ocean waves hitting the reef and depositing all this sand. That's where all the bonefish and the barracuda come up at low tide. But they also catch something else, detritus or flotsam and jetsam or stuff. And I've been searching for the perfect example. And I got a good feeling about this place. Success. Perfect. What's going to ride on this? There's only one thing better than wading the flats and fishing on a hot summer's day, and that's swimming the flats and fishing on a hot summer's day. I reckon Tom had a really good idea. The water temperature was magnificent. I mean, not that we were going to catch anything. Then again...
After such a long fight, the fish often needed reviving, as did we. We'd packed some Belizean beer in the boat. It's called Belican. I don't think the naming committee spent a lot of time on that one, but in the heat of the Caribbean sun, beer is beer. It was also a nice break from the fishing. We spent another few hours wandering the flats, catching bonefish and the odd small snapper. Honestly, you could live out here. In fact, a fellow and his dog do. We stumbled across his quay late in the day. He's even got his own man-made power source. Crusoe was his name.